Welcome to the Bytes of Azure podcast.
Fast, fresh, digestible cloud insights.
The latest updates, trends and technology.
Real talk with real Azure experts.
Let's unlock the cloud together.
Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of Bytes of Azure, our monthly digestible get-togethers where we talk all things techie, trends, any insights or unusual or interesting things that we've come across in the world of Azure. On this first one, we're going to be talking about multi-region strategy, why it's important, why it matters. I think it would be good, though, maybe if we just start off by who we are, why, and where we're from, like Cilla Black would say.
What's your name? Where'd you come from?
Exactly.
Do you want to go first, Chris?
Thank you. Chris Knapp, Azure Specialist at Bytes.
And I'm James Marshall, Chief Technology Strategist at Microsoft.
Fantastic. And I'm Tamsin, Team Lead of the Azure Specialist at Bytes. So the idea behind these sessions is obviously for us to have a conversation where we can really get stuck into hot topics and things that customers might find interesting, our customers that we talk to day in, day out, and just, I guess, share those insights that we hear. So sort of, I guess, diving straight in, multi-region, why does it matter? Why are we talking about it today?
I think it's that preparedness, and so like understanding it initially, and so looking at why it would be required, and so like customers looking at what it's often confused with, and so things like the high availability zones, for example, where organisations think they're doing a lot of the right thing, protecting themselves and making sure they're set up for if there is an issue with their infrastructure that's backed up. But a lot of the time in that instance, the high availability zone will be in the same region. So if we have an issue that impacts the whole region, that it takes out the actual instance and the backup. So we're still exposed in that sort of way. And likewise, you can look at it as multi-cloud as well, with organisations looking to protect themselves. And so you can have obviously Microsoft Azure, and there are third-party solutions available as well, which we will not speak. But we can also work in those sort of regions. But like if an organisation is looking at that, they have to be fully aware that they need to have a team that's skilled in both skill sets for that, and you have to have a landing zone in both capabilities. So if you're looking at a region like for Azure, looking at it in both those sort of ways, where if it's going to be impacted by a region wide, which most issues are region wide, if it's going to happen in that way, you are protected.
Yeah, and despite the whatever region you choose to be in, if you're in different hyperscalers, if that region's having an outage of some sort of type, the likelihood is that region's affected, across the board. There's all kinds of economical things that are happening in the world at the moment. I think one of the things that, I got asked the other day by a customer was, what happens, we've been asked by the business, what happens if we need to exit the country within a certain time frame, going back to the business kind of continuity, if we need to get out of a particular area, how do we do it, and how do we do it quickly? And so again, it's like, well, if you've already got and built into, how your business operates, a strategy, those sorts of things become so easy to solve because you've already gone and input, how are you going to? And the multi-region strategy kind of answers that. Are there any kind of things that you've come across in, when you're talking multi-region strategy that organisations tend to sort of, I guess, think more about why they would be doing it?
Cost. That's often a topic that comes up. How do you balance cost versus the need? So, a lot of conversations will be along the lines of, we need to achieve X. What's the cheapest way that we can do it? What's the fastest way that we can do it? Or, we have to work within these constraints. So, what are our options? And often that leads to compromises. And sometimes people overlook the impact of the compromises. So doing something cheaper might get you over the hurdle of, we have to satisfy the CFO's need for it to fit into this cost envelope. Meanwhile, you've actually opened up a ton of risk down the line, because by not being in a different region, not having a sort of, failover approach or something like that, you might be fine for months or even years, and then thinking everything's grand, and then there's some bump in the road that you didn't foresee happening, and then suddenly it's a world of pain and cost out of the blue, just because you were making that compromise right at the start. And it can be little things like, we'll just run one VM, and that just works, and it's fine. And it might be in like a dev test sense, but if you're rolling out a production app or whatever you might be doing, probably you're gonna need a little bit more consideration than just one VM in one place at one time. So,
and I think that's a really good point, is ultimately it comes down to the requirement of how important is it for the business to have that particular workload or that particular, access for their users to be able to go and do work or keep the business running. Having that multi-region strategy in place enables you to have those most critical workloads sitting in an area or a space that enables that continuity to be persistent. And like we were talking earlier around, understanding the challenge and what is it that actually the business needs. So that's where you can start helping bring those conversations around cost. You described going to the Lego store, right? I think if we all went into a Lego store, we'd come out with the whole shop. I know I would. But if you just specifically needed a toy car Lego to play with, you know what you're going in for and you're going to come out with, and it's going to be that toy and that's put together. So when we were approaching and talking to our customers about how do we build out a strategy that works for them, how do we ensure that they're getting the most value for money, but also having that balance between value for money, but also building the right things in for the business so that actually they don't get reputational impact from an outage. If a region were to go down, they've got all the continuity in place to be able to handle it. And I think it comes back time and time again, that conversation of minimal viable business. What do you need as a business at a minimum in order to stay online and running and serving your customers and not lose profit?
Yeah, and need versus want is really important as well. I think sometimes wants can get masked as needs, and that can have a big impact on your design, right? Because you might have a regulatory requirement, that's a need. You need to be in these kinds of regions and not in these kinds of regions, perhaps. Or you need to maintain this level of backup for, legislative reasons. You need to be able to go on audit or whatever. Those are hard and fast requirements. There might be technical considerations, like you need the application to respond in a certain amount of time. So, having your backup region on the other side of the world 100 milliseconds away is not going to be any good. Those are needs. Wants are more like, I'd like it to be here because I want it to be in the UK region, for example, because we're a UK company, perhaps, or, and splitting out those things to the core requirements and then designing backwards from there. The Lego shop analogy is great, right? Like you say, if you go in because you want to go and buy the car, go and buy the car, or go and buy all the bits to build the car. Don't go in going, I fancy some Lego, because you're going to come away with, an awful lot more than you need. And then that might not be actually what's, good for the business. And having too much complexity can also work against you. So it's about striking that balance between the real needs of what you have to achieve, and what you can also manage and maintain.
And I think there are so many benefits, not just let's have a backup plan, let's have the continuity in place to be able to survive or manage after this. The other benefits that are out there when you're talking multi-region is faster time to deploy things. So if you need to spin things up quicker and you've got a multi-region strategy and you need to serve particular locations, there's all kinds of advantages that come with having things built in a way and architected in a way that enable you to scale at pace. So say, for example, you're an organisation that, acquires a business that's in a different area, location, or is looking to go to market for a new type of customer. Your ability then to just go and deploy and serve customers and reduce latency and experience. So it becomes also an opportunity for businesses to kind of expand what they're doing, not just being that kind of help to mitigate risks. And I think it comes back to that shopping list, understanding what's your digital roadmap look like and how do we help you build for the future. I know obviously there's lots of use cases that we've seen with customers. Chris, have you got sort of any that are top of mind that kind of stick out as what we see when customers don't architect in a way that helps support them?
Yeah, I think like any seasonal based demand is the typical one we go to. So where that you're going to see any spikes, like I celebrate International Jaffa Cakes Day. I'm sure we all do.
I absolutely do.
And so like you need to be sure if you're going to like get in that sort of scenario, we're going to buy a load of Jaffa cakes for that day. Example, if one site's down, you move to the next one. So if you're not prepared and you're not ready for that sort of demand, there's lots of those sort of examples around like retail, entertainment, sporting tickets, where you need to be there because like consumers will move on. If your business is not ready for that scenario, you miss out. Likewise with like software as a service organisations, if you're looking to expand, in the example you talked about, like different regions have different geopolitical requirements where you need to be compliant and be able to service organisations in that region. So as you're growing as a business, becoming international, you need to be able to scale to that and provide it. So it's a good example where you get the resilience, but also you can provide a different level of service to different people that need that. And then finally, you get sadly, the organisations that have learned the hard way. And so I've talked you guys through it before, but my son does not look where he's going. So he'll often bang into things, and me telling him where to look is not working at the moment. Eventually, he's going to walk into something which he thinks, actually, yeah, I need to start looking because that hurt. And there are companies that have been caught out by this where they've had an issue that's taken out region-wide and it's had big impact on their business. And so they've actually, we need to get our act together here and plan. And so they've had to learn the hard way, but they have learned and they're resilient now, and they know that they can have the confidence if the issue comes back, they'll be ready for it.
Yeah, definitely. And ultimately, what one customer needs isn't necessarily going to be what another customer needs, and that's where defining the challenges, the requirements, the type of business comes in. And that's why I love what I do, is because every conversation is different. Despite us talking about technology, talking about the same technology, every conversation I have with a customer, there's general themes that reoccur and that run through, but there will be always something new on a call that goes, oh, I didn't think about that. It's like when I mentioned earlier about having that customer that goes, oh, we've been asked, if we need to evacuate from, a particular area, how do we do it? I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me about, how do we exit a country before in the way they were describing. So, it's nice to be able to kind of really help dig into the customer, what their moment of challenge is, and really help define what that could look like in terms of technology.
Well, I think what I like is that the technology can kind of do anything to an extent, right? If you step back from it, you can do anything. It depends on how big your wallet is and how much time you want to put behind it. And that, for me, that's the conversation I love having with customers and partners. Is we're at a point now where technology is practically magic. So what do you want to do with it? What's most important to you? And when you have a challenge like we need to exit a country rapidly, or we need to be able to serve customers around the sun support, or whatever it may, follow the sun support, whatever. We can do all of this. It's then just a question of, well, you could solve it this way or that way, and there will always be compromises, because usually the belt and braces most elegant solution is the one that takes time and costs money. Or there'll be, like I say, the fast and cheap ways to do things, and challenging people to understand. Going back to what I was saying about needs and wants, that's where you really start to unpick what's really holding them back from a business challenge, because it might be that they're trying to solve a problem one way, and by having that kind of curious conversation, delving into the need a little bit longer, you go, oh, actually, you're trying to solve this way. Had you thought about maybe thinking about it from a different perspective? And like one thing I see come up quite often is like the difference between reserved instances and automation. So quite often you get into the conversation and customers want to buy a reserved instance because that will control the cost of a VM, for example. And that's great, that's fine. But you're like, well, so what do you need? What are you trying to achieve with that? And they go, well, we just need to control the cost. I said, well, yeah, but did you know that actually if you could scale whatever you're running on that VM up or down, or automate it so it can be turned off out of business hours, or whatever, there's lots of different ways to think about it. You can achieve the same or better cost savings, but then you've got very good flexibility then to be able to burst out that workload if it needs to be, or to be able to scale it across different regions if it needs to be, whatever. If you just kind of buy a really beefy instance, slap a reserved instance on it, and let it sit there, you solve the one part of the challenge, which is I need to know the cost certainty, but then you lock yourself into a load of configuration that why would you ever do anything with that workload? If you bought a reserved instance for a year, let's say, you're not going to touch that.
You're going to keep it
You're
the
gonna
same.
just leave it on all the time, just leave it there. And meanwhile, there might be other challenges that you're facing that you're not getting to because you've backed yourself into the corner by just using that blunt instrument to solve that problem. And that's what I love about that sort of consultative approach. It's just like, let's get it all out on the table. It's a bit like an Apollo 13, where they could just like chuck all that stuff across the table. It's like,
How do we build this?
We know what the problem is. We've got to solve it with what's on this table.
Yeah.
How can we do it? That kind of thing that drives you thinking, okay, this is the best way to solve the problem. And it might be going for a multi-region approach and having some, active stuff going on or whatever you need to keep stuff going. But it might be that actually you can think about things in a slightly different way. And we have a whole well-architected framework which talks across various principles. Resilience is one of them. And it's got best practice ideas for, how to think about this when you're designing your landing zone or thinking about your, data center exit or whatever you might be doing. There's lots of guidance there for how best to do it.
So what would you say is the first step? We've talked about multi-region strategy, why it matters, why customers should be thinking about potentially looking at it as an option and a solution for helping their business and protect it going forward. What would you say is the first step in how do I get started with this?
I think it's identifying like you mentioned earlier, so like reiterating, is like what is that minimum viable business to get set up? So what do we need to achieve to like make sure that if we are looking to provide a multi-region service, that it's going to serve that purpose. So if we need to spin it up, it will be there and ready to go. And then finding a location that is suitable for that. So you talked about the regulatory concerns or like the requirements around that area. Just make sure that it's a suitable region and we know exactly what we need to spin up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think also we've got the whole, why don't we test this? Like, Bytes have a load of technical experts, and I know this is how we work with our customers. So what I'd say to customers is, if you're investigating this as a kind of a strategy and a route of to deployment, test it, see what works, go and have a go. Obviously with Bytes, we've got the ability to kind of leverage on the Microsoft relationship and get funding to help do those sorts of things. But I would definitely say, as like to customers that are thinking about starting this, go and look at that workload, identify it, like you say, Chris, find that particular workload and go and do like a dummy test run. Because business continuity is all about, well, actually, if someone were to press that button and, something were to happen, who's going to start the process of failing over, etc. And let's, get ready and go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Well, I would maybe start even further, even earlier than that, by saying, just start by admitting it's something we need to think about. There are loads of businesses out there that, IT is not their business, but yet every company is a software company in some shape. We're all digital these days, and there'll be loads of businesses out there who don't have dedicated IT support teams, or have some person who is the nominated IT person, but it's their secondary duty or whatever it might be, right? And just acknowledging that IT is the bedrock of the operation. Like, without your, shop front online, or without your ability to receive emails or whatever it might be, like, you're losing money because you can't do business. So it's something you need to take seriously, and just calling it out and be like, okay, this is maybe a topic we need to think about before you get into, do I think about high availability? Do I think about this, that, and the other? Just be like, we should probably have a conversation about this. And then working with, a great partner like Bytes, for example, to say, we think we probably should revisit our strategy here. And then, to your point, you've got the workshops, the funding, the expertise, the ability to provide, even right through to managed service, right? To be able to say, look, we hear you, we see that pain. We've done this 100 times with other customers. We're here to help, and actually we can take on some of that for you, whether it's managing your security posture or whatever it might be. You're that helping hand to those people in saying, you don't have to solve it on your own.
Yeah.
But actually, this is a phenomenally complex topic of which there is no one right answer to solve for. That's why you've got great architects and great knowledge experts whose job is to figure this stuff out. I think just starting there and saying, can we talk? That's I don't think it starts any more complicated than that. I think that's the first step.
Yeah, I'd say that's great advice, James. So come and talk to us, basically. I think everyone, just on a serious note, I think everyone in every organisation has a struggling moment, and obviously, knowing that you have a partner that you can rely on to come reach out and be able to have those conversations in a place where actually we want what's best for our customers. We don't want to see customers struggling. We want to make sure that you're building for resiliency, but you're also building to, with in mind that every business has to have an operating cost and keep costs down. So, we want to ensure that everything's taken into consideration. Yeah, so I think what is really great is that Bytes and Microsoft have such an incredibly strong relationship. We've been working with each other for over 35 years. We know how to get the best out of that relationship, leveraging the resources that Microsoft make available, as well as obviously making sure our customers have access into all of the Bytes resources and programs that are available. What do you think, James, is so special about that Bytes Microsoft relationship?
I mean, Bytes is one of our best partners globally. We're one of our top partners. And that partnership has gone, like you say, from strength to strength over the years. I think that's testimony to the level of service and support you give and value you to your customers, and the value we have as a vendor in that partnership, right? We bring the products to market, but you take them that last mile to the customer and make it real. And that partnership you can't beat, because we can't scale all that way. We need partners like Bytes to be able to go and bring that last bit of context, that last bit of experience, and on-the-ground delivery, and take that value to customers. And I think that's why it works so well. And I think that's what customers really appreciate, is seeing actually they don't just have to self-serve on these things and go to a website and read up on stuff, but there is a number they can call, there is an email address they can contact, or a account manager at the end of the phone who is got an army of experts behind them to go and solve the whole solution. And that's where partnership is really important. I think, as I say, Bytes is one of our best partners for doing that. And I think there's worse places you could go for help.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. We've been working on so many different customer projects together. It's always great when you see the end result, but then also you go back and you start talking about the next. How else can we help you? We've done a great job, I think, of covering, multi-cloud or multi-region strategy. And, we're not just here to support customers for a specific topic.
Yeah, I think it's important to call out that a multi-region strategy isn't just about disaster recovery and disaster avoidance. It's enabling organisations really to serve anyone, anywhere where they've got opportunity out there. It's really helping to return extra value on that investment in the cloud. Yeah.
No, and thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. I think we've done a great job on the first podcast. Here's to many, many more over the coming months. And, if any of our customers need any support, we've got account managers they can reach out to look after them. But also, if you email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, someone will be in contact to help support.